Professor William Crookes wasn't sure what he was supposed to expect from that night. For a long time, he'd been hearing about spiritualism and seances, but as a scientist with a respected voice in society, he was supposed to be the kind of person who didn't believe in such superstitions. In fact, people expected that someone like him would be the one to put an end to all of this nonsense. But Crookes was curious, and he wanted to see things for himself. The lights dimmed, the voices went quiet, and the room fell into complete darkness and total silence, until a girl materialized out of thin air right before his eyes. In the 19th century, a religious movement called spiritualism spread across Europe and America. The beliefs of spiritualism were built on the foundation of communicating with the spirits of the dead, who, according to its followers, held answers about the secrets of the universe and life after death. Communication with spirits took place in what were known as seances, where spiritualists used methods and tools like the well-known Ouija boards, through which spirits could communicate with those present. By knocking on walls and furniture, by possessing one of the attendees and speaking through them, or in rare cases, by physically materializing in front of everyone. Seances were typically conducted by individuals known as mediums. A medium, according to spiritualist belief, was a person with the ability to communicate with spirits. This ability was usually a gift they discovered within themselves, and it could be developed and strengthened through training and practice. The spiritualist movement reached its peak during the second half of the 19th century through the early 20th century, with its practitioners estimated to have numbered in the millions across Europe and America, particularly among the wealthy and middle classes. Although the movement lost its popularity over the years, several variations of it are still practiced to this day. Florence Cook was a girl from England, born in 1856. Florence's family was middle class. She was born in a small village outside of London, but they moved into the city when she was 3 years old. She was the eldest among her 4 siblings. From her childhood days, Florence used to notice certain paranormal phenomena. When she was alone, she would hear voices calling her by her name, and at other times she would see figures hiding in the shadows. Florence would tell her parents about what was happening to her, but they believed these were just normal childhood imaginations for a girl her age, so they never took her seriously. When she was 14 years old, Florence was at a tea party with her friends. One of her friends suggested they try something new, a seance. It was something scary yet exciting at the same time for girls their age. They dimmed the lights, sat around the table, and began the session. In the middle of the darkness and silence, one of the girls asked if there was a spirit present in the room that wanted to communicate with them. Florence felt a mix of fear and excitement. She imagined she might finally get answers to the questions that had haunted her since childhood. Florence asked the spirit whether it knew if she was a medium. The spirit's response to Florence's question was intense and frightened everyone present, but it put all doubt to rest. Florence was no ordinary person. Florence was a spirit medium. From that night forward, Florence began experimenting with and testing her abilities as a medium. She would sit at home, sometimes alone, sometimes with her family and friends, and try to communicate with spirits. It was clear from her experiences that she was a highly promising medium with exceptional abilities for her age. According to Florence, in one of her sessions, a spirit revealed to her the name and address of a person who could help her develop her abilities. Florence visited this person, who turned out to be a member of the Spiritualist Society in London. Florence began attending spiritualist meetings regularly, and through them she got acquainted with instructors named Frank Hearn and Charles Williams, who agreed to train her and refine her skills. Florence's abilities developed at a pace that astounded her instructors. The name Florence Cook began to spread throughout the spiritualist community, and her reputation grew as one of the most prominent mediums in London, not just because of her exceptional abilities for her age, but also because she managed to do something that very few had ever been able to do. And that was that Florence was able to fully materialize a spirit. During her training period, Florence had been communicating with the spirit of a girl named Katie King, and she was in continuous contact with her. At first, it was through knocking and sounds. Then Katie's face began appearing during the seances, and gradually the rest of her body manifested until she was appearing in full form in front of all the attendees. Florence was the first English female medium capable of fully materializing a spirit. This ability stunned audiences and had a profound effect on them. Because of this, Florence Cook's reputation spread far and wide, and spiritualists from all over the world began traveling to London for the chance to attend seances with her. Seances involving spirit materialization had to follow a specific method and special rules. Among them was that they had to be held in a dark place with a limited number of attendees. The medium would sit behind a curtain or in a separate room, preventing participants from seeing her during the seance rituals, while being tied to a chair in a way that allowed the audience to confirm she couldn't manipulate anything. Once the spirit materialized and came out from behind the curtain, participants were forbidden from touching it, because according to spiritualist belief, touching a spirit without its consent could cause severe pain and harm to both the spirit and the medium. The spirit would typically tell the audience a story, sharing secrets of the universe and answering their questions. And after the session ended, the spirit would return and hide behind the curtain, after which the curtain would be opened to reveal the medium, still tied to the chair. These rules might seem designed for deception and fraud, and honestly, that feeling was common at the time. Despite the large number of believers in the truth of spiritualist beliefs and seances, there was an equally large number of skeptics who believed the whole thing, or at least parts of it, was nothing but lies and trickery, especially given that attending sessions with well-known mediums came with a price tag that was out of reach for anyone outside the wealthy class. Florence Cook was a famous medium known for her materialization of Katie King. And just as she had a loyal and supportive audience, she also had skeptics and opponents. During one of her seances in 1873, attended by a group of London's elite, including lawyers, businessmen, and politicians, Florence sat behind the curtain and summoned Katie King. Katie emerged from behind the curtain and sent the audience into a state of amazement. Had this girl in white clothes been there before the session? Yet she had materialized from thin air and was walking among them as if she were a living human being. It was a strange and breathtaking sight for everyone, except for one person. One of the attendees, a lawyer named William Volkman, had a feeling something wasn't right. Although he believed in spiritualist ideas and communicating with the dead, he possibly viewed the full materialization of spirits as exaggerated and an overestimation of mediums' abilities. Volkman was studying Katie's features closely, and he was increasingly convinced he had seen those features somewhere before. They matched perfectly with the features of the medium Florence, who was supposedly behind the curtain at that very moment. This became clearer and clearer the closer Katie got to him, until she was standing directly in front of him. Volkman extended his arm and grabbed Katie's hand, pulled her toward him with force, and wrapped his arm around her body. He said in agitation that this girl, Katie, Florence, or whatever her name was nothing but a fraud deceiving everyone, and that anyone who looked at her should be able to see that the ghost and the medium were one and the same person. What happened next was somewhat unclear and varies between accounts. Some say Katie evaporated right out of Volkman's hands. Others say she resisted and freed herself from his grip, and some say she screamed and several attendees quickly rose to their feet and freed her from him. It's said that Katie either disappeared from the room or returned and hid behind the curtain after being freed from his grasp, and a few minutes later Florence reappeared. Luckily for her, the audience rallied to her defense and threw Volkman out of the session for his rudeness and disrespect toward those present. But what was done, and Volkman's assault was quite literally a blow to Florence's credibility. The story spread and people started talking. Although Volkman's accusations were logical, Florence's supporters had some responses to them. First, it was natural that the spirit and the medium would look similar because the spirit came through the medium, so that was to be expected in the first place. Second, the materialization of spirits was an actual physical manifestation that produced complete bodies of flesh and blood and bone. They weren't necessarily intangible apparitions. And perhaps most importantly, there were people who claimed they had seen Florence and Katie in the same room at the same time. Given all of this, The debate over Florence's credibility grew between supporters and opponents, and Florence felt she needed someone powerful in her corner, someone whose opinion carried weight, who was known for basing their conclusions on evidence and scientific facts rather than superstition and baseless beliefs. Someone like Professor William Crookes. William Crookes was a well-known scientist with an impressive resume. He had studied chemistry and physics, and throughout his career he discovered the chemical element thallium, and he had numerous inventions to his name, among them the Crookes tube, named after him, which was the foundation for the discovery of X-rays, one of the most important scientific discoveries we still use to this day. Crookes was a man of science with a solid reputation in English society, and he was the ideal person to settle the debate surrounding Florence Cook. Florence reached out to Professor Crookes, who expressed interest in her case because he was interested in hidden scientific phenomena such as radio waves. Perhaps spirits and ghosts were also hidden phenomena with a scientific explanation that could be detected and measured. It seems Crookes believed the possibility was worth exploring and was interested in studying the matter himself. Crookes agreed to study the phenomenon of spirit materialization with Florence, but on his own terms. He required that all sessions be held at his home, that all attendees be of his choosing, and that he have the right to determine and modify the conditions of each session however he saw fit. As for spirits like Katie, he had the right to examine her in whatever manner he deemed appropriate, with no other implications, and restrictions like the no-touching rule and other conditions that could lead to manipulation would not apply to him. Florence agreed to the terms, and sessions for summoning Katie were indeed held at Crookes' home, with his family and friends present as witnesses. According to Crookes, he would search Florence before and after every session, and he wouldn't let her out of his sight from the moment she entered his home until she left it. Sometimes she didn't leave at all and would stay over for days. In other words, Crookes was confident he wasn't giving her any opportunity for trickery or manipulation. During the sessions, Florence required all attendees to stay in their seats, but Crookes was allowed to move around and look behind the curtain. According to Crookes, there were times when Katie would step behind the curtain, and he would follow her and see both the spirit and the medium together at the same time. But in most instances, Katie would vanish without a trace, and all Crookes would find behind the curtain was Florence. Perhaps the most important thing Crookes did during his study of Katie was photograph her. He took more than 40 photographs, most of them clear, showing Katie's white clothing and her features in sharp detail. Fortunately, we have some clear photographs of Florence as well, so we can compare the two women side by side. I'll leave it to you to judge how similar they look. But as far as Crookes was concerned, he saw that the two were indeed similar but not identical. According to him, there were distinguishing differences between them. Florence had scars on her face that were not present on Katie's. Florence's hair was dark, bordering on black, while Katie's hair was red bordering on golden, and Katie was also taller than Florence. Crookes' study of Katie and Florence continued for approximately 6 months, during which seances were held almost daily. Crookes conducted physical examinations on Katie, measuring her weight, height, and vital signs such as heart rate and breathing speed, and compared them with Florence's. He placed devices on Florence designed to detect any manipulation, such as an attempt to change her clothing, but he did not detect any manipulation attempts, according to his account. In fact, Crookes said Florence was extremely cooperative throughout that entire period. She answered all his questions and responded to all his requests and conditions. Crookes said that over this period, he came to trust her, and he never once sensed any attempt at deception or manipulation from her. On the contrary, during that time a friendship formed between them that extended even to Katie and to Crookes' children. Crookes spoke about one particular evening when Katie sang to the children. William Crookes completed his study of Katie and Florence and finally announced his conclusion. And that conclusion was that Katie King was real, and that she and Florence Cook were two different individuals. Crookes documented the details of the study and its methodology in a book he called Researches in the Phenomena of Spiritualism. Crookes was met with an enormous wave of criticism because of his findings, and he still faces it to this day, with widespread astonishment at how a scientist like Crookes could arrive at a conclusion that was described as laughable. Some said Crookes had severe vision problems and was therefore not qualified to conduct such a study in the first place. Others said Florence was able to fool him using a wig and makeup, or through accomplices who managed to sneak into his home. And then there were those who claimed Florence had seduced him and convinced him to sacrifice his reputation and standing for this study. But Crookes stood firm in his position. In fact, he pushed back against his critics in the book, saying they had rushed to judgment. He also clarified an important point, that he did not believe in the spiritualist or supernatural interpretations of spirit materialization. Crookes believed the phenomenon had a scientific explanation, but that human understanding of the subject was still too limited and insufficient to fully comprehend it. In the book, Crookes wrote about the final night of Katie King's summoning. Florence announced that the time had come for Katie to return to the spirit world, and she announced the date of the last seance. Crookes attended the session and said that this time, Katie sat privately with each person she had formed a friendship with, saying personal goodbyes to each of them. She then addressed all those present and told them her time of departure had arrived, urging them to take care of Florence. She then returned behind the curtain and asked Professor Crookes to follow her. Behind the curtain, Crookes found Florence lying unconscious on the floor. Katie woke her and told her the time of departure had come. Florence cried and begged Katie to stay, but Katie told her that her work in the human world was finished, and she had to return to the spirit world. The two embraced and wept, until Florence collapsed on the floor from the intensity of her crying. Crookes moved closer to Florence, took her hand, and helped her to her feet. As she began to rise from the floor, Crookes lifted his head and looked around, but there was no trace of Katie anywhere. Katie had vanished completely, in exactly the same way she had appeared, out of nothing and back into nothing.